you or makes you angry. So if you get really frustrated with traffic, you can make a little car or whatever. You're not gonna have to share it. I'm not gonna make you present your sculptures. Don't have to make them, and don't be concerned about the quality of these on your table. And for this table, there's some more right here in this bin and over here. So in front of Mark. So now we're good. Just in case you don't know, the kids ministry is actually a specific group. It's preschool through 5th grade. So I'm going to be talking from kind of that perspective. You can see up on the slide kind of what we do. If you're thinking about preschool, like downstairs, who do the educating of like the ABCs, that's not us. If you're thinking of kids music, that's not us. Sports and leisure, not us. The adorable little babies down there, also not us. We're just kids ministry, and we partner with all of those. So whenever I talk about this is from the pre-K through 5th grade window, is my kind of sphere of influence. And then we go to the next one. And I always get the microphone because probably I'm bossy and I'm going to talk over anybody anyway, but this is actually the kids team. All of these people help run the kids ministry and are integral into it. You have me, you have Jennifer Dees, who you've probably seen. She's been doing this as long as I have. We have a new hire starting in March who's replacing Megan, who was on the team for a while. We just got her acceptance yesterday, so I'm super stoked, but I'm not telling her name because I need to do the background check. And then we have 2 interns who you've probably seen floating around. They're kind of quieter, Beth and Brooke. And they are here with us through May in kids, and they're running through that pastoral residency program. So then we have one more additional part-time position. So there's this whole team that does kids ministry that comes up with these ideas like the Play-Doh on the table and fidgets. And unless it's a Wednesday, in which case Jennifer leaves me by myself in the office and I buy more fidgets because I go shopping. But so those are the team doing all of this stuff. All right, having answered that, that's who the kids ministry is. If you have any questions, I have notes over here. I'm going to try to catch myself up. So this is what we're talking about today. Jesus clearing the temple courts. You have heard this story. It's actually told 2 different times. There are 2 different instances of it happening. So we're going to talk about the one from John. And the question that I'm asking today is this a moment of, I'm sorry, there's a camera I'm supposed to stand in front of, which means I'm supposed to hold still, which is now you see why we have the fidgets, because that's not what I do well. Kids don't like when you hold still, so I move around one. Cool. My question today is this an example of a really gigantic temper tantrum in a fully human moment, or is it a teachable moment that God gives us through his son? So not to imply that Jesus is not being godly, but he's both, right? So the question is, which one are we seeing here? So here's what a tantrum is. We've seen it. You can see it every Sunday on the Hall if you would like to come down and relive it if you're missing out on it. It is that moment where an emotion boils over, right? Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's a lack of control. Like when we tell those kids, you're not going with mom and dad to their Sunday school, you're going to come to our Sunday school. And until I give them the Play-Doh or the fidgets, they think it's the worst thing in the world, right? It's the falling over. Maybe you're hitting something. Maybe you're laying on the floor. You're probably making a lot of noise, right? So this is what I talk about whenever I'm talking about a tantrum, like a boiling over of emotion. Maybe it's yelling. Could be, flipping over a table. And this is a teachable moment. So we call a teachable moment that moment when something's happened that wouldn't be the best course of action, but you can take something from it, right? Like maybe your kid smashed his ball out in the yard and it's broken and it's not repairable, but you can sit him down and explain how you got there, what course of action you could take next time. It's an opportunity to do better than you did before. So, and to be a better version of you. So before we get into the story, which is very short, you're going to be excited. Here's the setting of the scene. So we are talking about the time leading right up to Passover. This is a time that a lot of people would pilgrimage over to the temple. They would come in and they would pay their tribute, right? So they're coming with an intention to go into the temple and to make their right with God or to honor God, right? They have traveled a long time. They're in a big group and they're all coming at the same time. So it also happens right after Jesus has performed his first miracle, which was changing the water into wine. And if you remember, he already said at that time, it's not my time yet, right? Like I'm not supposed to be announcing myself yet. But he did that anyway at his mother's request, right?
So here we go. This is the temple layout. If you've ever read the description of this in the Bible, I needed a picture. I did way better with a picture. But there are all these I need like I'm going to gesture at it and you're going to pretend like you can figure it out. In the middle here is where all the actual worship happens, where the yellow roof is and those little walls, right? The area where this event happens is this bigger area around, right? This is where everybody can come in, they can mingle. It's not divided up by how important you are as a priest or whether you're a man or a woman, right? This is kind of the common area of the temple, and that's where this is going to take place. But imagine if you walked into that big space and it is full of tables and it is full of people yelling and it is full of animals. This is not like a small room here where you come in and the chaos is going to be mitigated just by space. There's enough room for it to be stinky and loud. It's full of not just the smaller doves, but you've got all the oxen and everything. So it's overwhelmingly loud as you're supposed to be getting ready to pay tribute, right? As you're supposed to be getting ready to go in and worship after making your pilgrimage. So it's chaotic. And that's what we walk into with this first part. So this is the quiet part. This is the loud part. Okay. They do not let me come talk to adults that often, or actually I don't volunteer to do it that often. It was not a fight to get permission to be here, but usually they give me toys and slides. So here we go. So it was almost time for the Jewish Passover. Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and in the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging monies. None of this was bad, y'all. This was what was supposed to happen. If you imagine you have been traveling with a large group of people for an extended period of time, you are not going to carry a cage of doves, nor are you going to drag a cattle with you. It's like a whole nother level of burden. So these tables that with the selling of the animals were set up so that people could do the sacrifice that's required by the law, and it's supposed to be helpful. So it's not bad that they are there and that they are selling them, because it allows people to make their sacrifice without the extra burden of trying to drag this spotless lamb, a whole 3 days journey with them. So that's not bad, nor is the exchanging of money. If you see down here at the bottom, these are the coins they would have been using, but they're coming from all different places. And many of them would have had Roman coins or other currency that's not accepted at the temple. You could, as a sign of honor, you didn't pay your tithe to God with Caesar's face on it, right? So you exchanged that coin to get one that was considered neutral, religion neutral, right? So that's also okay. Nothing happening here started off as disrespectful. But here we go. So he makes a whip out of cords and drove all the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get out of here. Stop turning my father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The problem isn't the tables are set up. The problem is that it's not a even exchange. It's become a market. These people have filled the courtyard, a place of honor and preparation for tribute, with a profit center. Now you have something that started out perfectly reasonable and has become greed mongering. The poorest pilgrims are paying a huge upcharge for these doves that they have to slaughter to make right with the Lord, that they cannot be forgiven until they do. And Jesus is irate. He's like, "You've taken something good and holy and gentle, and it's supposed to bring connection to my Father, and you are making a profit on it. And you have made a loud, stinky, dangerous mess, not for honor of my Father, but for your own greed," right? So he gets a little salty about it. He says, the Jews then responded to him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do this?" And Jesus answers them, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." We saw that temple, it's giant, right? And they replied, "It's taken 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciple recalled what he said. Then they believed the scriptures and the words that Jesus has spoken. If you've ever worked with kids, you are very aware that there are times that you say something and you have every knowledge that you are 100% accurate, and they have no idea what you're talking about, right? And so that's kind of what we say here. So as we go into tantrum or teachable moment, these are the parts we're looking at. We're looking at Jesus, who has gotten just so angry about what was happening that he has flipped over tables. He has created a mess of coins. He created a cord of ropes, and he's swinging it around, presumably at the animals, but don't get in the way. If you got somebody who's got a temper tantrum going, they don't care what's happening, right? There are exclamations and name calling. And if we think about the nature of God, sometimes he does get mad and do stuff, right? There are floods that have happened. There are plagues that were sent. Sometimes there is something physical that we see from God that represents what's going on and is meant to get our attention. So is that what Jesus is doing here? Is he gotten into a fully human moment and he feels all of those emotions we feel? So you have your Play-Doh in front of you now, something that you have built that makes you really angry. I want you to take a moment and smash it as flat as you can smash it, like into a pancake, and feel what that feels like when you take that thing that makes you frustrated and you just absolve yourself of it, right? If you haven't made a shape because nothing makes you mad, just take a ball of Play-Doh and give it a good smash and see what that feels like, right? That physical unleashing, and it's those toddlers like in this picture, it's the only way they can show their emotion, right? So when you get done with that and you kind of take a breath, you feel different, right? You've let out all that anger, you've let out that emotion. You might have accidentally smashed it into a fidget, which you didn't mean to do. Or, in this case, maybe you've turned over a couple of tables and left the money all over the ground, which is justified in your anger and your emotion. But it's not what we usually see from Jesus, right? When he is upset by something, even in the face of physical torture, he stays calm and collected. So I'd like you to consider perhaps this is one of those moments that the more human side of Jesus comes out. And why would that matter, right? Well, because we're talking about Easter, and we're talking about the fact that this is a man who is going to go through huge trials and tribulations, both physical and mental. He's going to be abandoned by everybody, and he's going to be physically beaten. And if we think back to the fact that he can have a temper tantrum and feel all of those physical emotions and all of those internal things that we feel, then he's going to feel those on the way to the cross as well. He's going to feel those at Easter. And it reminds us that he is really a big part of us. But let's say maybe he's not having a temper tantrum, right? Maybe he's taking the high road, right? I'm not trying to show bias, but I definitely have an opinion here. All right. So a teachable moment, it's a time after that unpleasant experience, right? That you go back. Let's say Jesus isn't having a temper tantrum and he is trying to get everybody's attention. Yelling and shouting amongst all of these oxen and all of the other noise would be pretty unusual, pretty unhelpful, right? Nobody's gonna pay attention to him. It's already loud and there's plenty of shouting going on. But if you stop all the action, and if you've seen me do it with the kids, you'll hear me go, "Hey, clap once if you can hear my voice," right? You have probably heard it somewhere in the church, whether you were standing with me or not. Thank you. So sometimes getting a physical reaction from people, right? Getting them to stop and to take away all the things they're doing. You have seen me, if you ever go to chapel, you'll see me walk by and take like one of those little pew cards from a kid mid-conversation, right? Because I'm physically taking away the thing that's distracting them. You can keep your fidget. But so what if he takes that and he's just stopping what they're doing? And then he backs up and he's like, "This is not how you're going to treat this house. Look around. Now stop and look. Look at the money that's all over the floor, the greed that is physically evident. Look at the way that the cattle and the oxen have been driven out and how much quieter it is here now, that we haven't overloaded it with more animals than we needed in this space to be able to make this sacrifice." Pause and stop and see what you've turned the first impression of this temple into for pilgrims who are coming in. What if Jesus is giving them a teachable moment, a moment to stop and think about, this is not supposed to be about you making your money at the Passover. This is supposed to be about you preparing the animal or your tribute to take into the inner sanctuary of that temple to get closer to God in a place that you couldn't do before you made this pilgrimage here. And so what if he's taking an opportunity, not just to the people who are pilgrims there, to say, hey, stop and think. But the people who are setting up the temple as a marketplace, right? The people who do this every day, day in and day out, and say, you could be part of a holy process, but you are choosing to make it more about you than about God, right? If he stops everything and sets it out, and then he obviously sets himself as an authority. They said, what authority do you have to do this? And in a 100% current moment, he says something that makes no sense. Tear down this temple and I will rebuild it. And one of our questions is going to get into, have you ever had that moment where something made no sense at the time? Don't run down the stairs because it's not safe. Sure, it's not safe. I run down the stairs 1,000 times a day until you finally miss that bottom stairs and you land flat on your face and you realize your mom and dad were right the whole time, right? Or that you run into somebody who's walking through the church and you both fall down and now you've bonked your heads and you're crying, right? Things that don't make any sense when they're said to you, but become abundantly clear later. So the second argument is this could be a teachable moment, right? It could be an opportunity for these people to reconnect better to God and not Jesus just to show his emotion, but also an opportunity for him to stand in front of them and say, I am not just a man. I've done my first miracle. I haven't done all the others yet. He has not been traveling around healing people and clearing the lepers and making people walk. He hasn't done anything hugely of note. But in this moment, he's standing there saying, I have the authority to clear the courtyard, and you're going to watch me and learn why. So these are the two things that kind of happen, the two big things that happen in the story, right? So here are your questions. Let me get to them early so you have extra coffee time. And also because usually I can only tell a story for 5 minutes before people lose attention, so I'm very proud of you. All right, so here are your discussion questions. The first one is, which do you see the story pointing toward? A tantrum in a moment of humanity or a teachable moment from God incarnate? Have you ever been part of a project or undertaking that started out with good intentions, like the money exchangers, and then went off track? And who pointed out the derailments? And then did a parent or mentor ever give you advice or wisdom that you didn't fully appreciate till later? If you want to share it, you can share it. I don't know how friendly you are in your groups, but do you still use that wisdom today? So I don't know if we typically go question by question or
You just switch people to the table.
have at it. Have your conversations. I'll walk around.
Bill, thank you for opening us this morning.
Well, thank you, Mark. It was my pleasure. And
Well done.
good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Gentlemen.